No argument at all. No deliberation of students, no deliberation of faculty. Just fiat. Boom, it's gone. Why is it gone? Fear, force, coercion. That's not a good sign in terms of trying to shape the souls and character and integrity and honesty of young people.
Robbie says that the universities had, from within, abandoned or neglected the search for truth. Is that a ideologically neutral criticism, or does it have a coloration? Is it that the universities have leaned too far to the left? Is it that they don't have enough intellectual and political diversity in their ranks? Is it that they've become the promoters of critical studies where the taking down the powerful and undermining the structures of order and hierarchy becomes their main purpose? Something like that. It's not just, is it not, that they've abandoned the pursuit of truth, it's that they've distorted the enterprise, the intellectual enterprise, on behalf of a particular ideological coloration, or am I wrong? And I'm asking
Glenn, I want to add to your question.
Yeah, sure.
Robert, is Professor Eisgruber's first name Chris?
Yes, President Eisgruber. He's the president of our university.
Yeah, okay. Christopher Eisgruber would completely disagree with the sermon that you just gave, which I agree with completely. He would not recognize himself in it, and he would think that you are distorting what Princeton has become. Christopher Eisgruber, I'm sure, I haven't met him, but I'm sure he thinks that the way that he thinks and the things that he sanctioned are truth. He feels like he's arrived at a truth that other people just aren't aware of. He has a religion, although he wouldn't recognize it. And he's not an idiot. He's not crazy. He's a very good person. What would you say to him if he were on this show, where he would really push back against what you said? What would you say in response?
Chris Eisgruber is actually an old friend of mine, as well as the president of my university. We go back more than 40 years. We were graduate students together at Oxford. I bought his bicycle. He sold me his bicycle when we were graduate students together. And then we ended up in the same field. I mean, his primary field is constitutional law. My secondary field is constitutional law. My primary field is philosophy of law. But we've done some teaching together, including at Princeton. We've certainly interacted professionally as scholars, as well as friends for many years. We have a number of disagreements, obviously. He tends to be on the more liberal side of things. I tend to be on the more conservative side of things. And we do have some differences, you're right, John, in our assessment of the current circumstances of universities. He would, I think, object to the scope and depth of my criticism, but he doesn't have his head in the sand. He knows there are problems here, and he has publicly said there are problems here. And one of the problems he's identified goes to Glenn's question, and that is the problem of the absence of viewpoint diversity on campus. He, a few years ago, just before COVID, invited my liberal colleague, Stephen Macedo, who at the time was heading Princeton's University Center for Human Values, and me as the director of the James Madison Program in American Ideals and Institutions, to convene a meeting with about a dozen Princeton faculty members and then a dozen people from outside the university, scholars from outside the university, specifically to discuss the problem of insufficient viewpoint diversity on campus. He himself came to the meeting. He spent the entire day with us. He recognizes we have a problem here. Now, does he think the problem is as dire as I think it is? I think the answer to that is no, he doesn't think it's dire, but he also doesn't think it's not a problem. He does think it needs to be addressed. Now, he thinks we can address it while maintaining some things that are important to him, especially in what we've come to call the DEI area. He doesn't see the potential conflict, or at least he doesn't see it as that necessarily a conflict between his diversity and inclusion goals and academic freedom and viewpoint diversity. I'm more skeptical about that than he is. But while we differ, we're not we're not so far apart that we can't have an intelligent conversation about it or a civil conversation about it. And he does recognize that we do have problems. He's said the same thing about anti-Semitism on campus very recently. While he's been in the forefront, absolutely in the forefront of all university presidents, he's been most in the forefront of criticizing the Trump administration's recent moves in the funding area as part of its campaign against anti-Semitism on campus. He has conceded, that might not even be the right word, he's agreed that there is a problem with anti-Semitism on campus. We recently had it right here on our Princeton campus. An Israeli politician came to speak at our university under the auspices of our Jewish chaplaincies. And his talk was disrupted. He was shouted down. There was an effort to try to. There was someone actually pulled the fire alarm, which ended the conversation. But among the things people were shouting to the Jewish students and to the speaker was, "Go back to Poland." Now that's just a straight up anti-Semitic statement. That's not the criticism of Israel, which is perfectly legitimate. Any government may legitimately be criticized. There are Jewish people in that room who would criticize the current government of Israel, including its war policies. But if you're shouting, "Go back to Poland," we all know what that means. And to his credit, President Eisgruber has acknowledged that we do have problems like that. John, have I been fair? I don't want to dodge your question just because Chris is my boss.
No, I just want to get it out there that I find it very hard to get myself into the mind of someone who says that they realize that there's a problem with the ideological tilt on campuses and a problem with seeking the truth, who would also get furiously behind all of that anti-racism agitprop in 2020, 2021 on that campus, for example, that hideous manifesto that went out. He stood behind that and yet feels that Princeton is committed to a search for neutral truth. I just personally, I'm not saying that you are a phony, because you're not. I'm not calling him a phony, but I can no more get into that person's head on that than I can get into the head of, well, somebody who I really don't understand.
Cornell, were you not at Princeton in 2020?
No, I don't know where I was 2020, but
but you have been at Princeton. You were on the faculty there, and you decamped.
Can I interrupt there? Because I believe I can remember this pretty well. I think Cornell was at Harvard, and I remember getting a phone call from Cornell when it was suddenly announced that President Eisgruber had decided to remove Woodrow Wilson's name from the building that houses what was the Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs and is now simply the School of Public and International Affairs. And Cornell called me because he had been in conversations with his daughter, Zaytun. I call her my niece, Zaytun. She calls me Uncle Robbie, who was here as an undergraduate at the time and is still here as a graduate student. And Zaytun had said to her father, Cornell, this is being done with no real consultation. It seems to be just an executive order with no serious discussion about it. No matter how one thinks the question ultimately ought to be resolved, it shouldn't be by some sort of fiat. There should be some broad-ranging discussion, and then we decide what to do. So, Cornell, do you remember that?
Oh, absolutely. I called you right away and said, we went into the president's office in 1975 as a graduate student. I was a graduate student there in philosophy, but Larry Morris and Hank Coleman in economics, Craig Watson in economics. You might know them, Brother Glenn. And we sat in the president's office and said, we have an argument against Woodrow Wilson, given the resegregation and given the birth of the nation, ... Yeah. He gave a counter argument and said, no, Woodrow Wilson was our president. I agree with Woodrow Wilson trying to eliminate all of the eating clubs on Prospect. I'm in solidarity with Woodrow Wilson in that regard. Also, the graduate college where I lived, as well as my beloved daughter. She's a third-year graduate student right now in the German department. But we had an argument. We went back and forth. So I agreed with the elimination of the name. I just felt that it was coercive. It was forced. There was no Socratic energy, so that it sent a bad message to students thinking you don't have to argue your way through. All you have to do is just enact brute force. So you got Thrasymachus trumping Socrates. And I told the students that themselves. I said, we put forth the arguments in 75. I think we had the best arguments, but we lost. So it stayed around for another 40-some, 50 years. But then how does it disappear? No argument at all. No deliberation of students, no deliberation of faculty. Just fiat. Boom, it's gone. Why is it gone? Fear, force, coercion. That's not a good sign in terms of trying to shape the souls and character and integrity and honesty of young people.